Today, we're going to be taking on the subject of how do you get your partner to keep up when you are leveling up? And what I mean by that is so many women that come through my programs, they see such extraordinary changes in themselves. And one of the things they find themselves wrestling with is, okay, I'm doing all this work and I feel great. I'm starting to see changes in myself. They're measurable, it's visible, people are noticing. But I'll get off our coaching calls and then go back into my quote unquote normal life. And I find myself getting frustrated or even at times resentful of my partner because they're just not keeping up. And so I thought it would be great for us to really speak on this topic and really help women and their partners get on the same page about this, because when you're shifting mindset, it changes everything. And so I thought it'd be great for us to talk about this. So let's start off by just going back in time a little bit. So when I started to study material on mindset, how the brain works, sabotage patterns, and getting out of fear, doubt, negativity, lack, and scarcity, all the things that we talk about all the time, what were some of the things that you noticed about that, and what was going through your mind?
Well, what was going through my mind at times was sometimes maybe it was a little kooky. Sometimes it was odd. Kooky and odd might be synonymous, but
what was kooky and what was odd?
Well, you being an accomplished professional, I didn't see a whole lot of flaw in your mind game, your mental game. But it's hard to understand what the fertility process and what growth demands of a person. And so, yeah, some of the things that I saw, whether it be a physical procedure or a mind practice or some of the things like that, I saw that, oh, that's odd. I don't know if I would do that, but I'm enjoying seeing you happy with it and your growth through it. Didn't mean I was going to run out and embrace it for myself, but I didn't need to. I knew it made you happy and I knew it was working for you.
Well, I think you bring up an interesting point, because that goes to a core question about why somebody would do mindset work anyway, right? Because if you're in a situation where, this mindset that helped me get through law school, helped me become a physician, or helped me become a successful business owner, like, what else do you need? I mean, that's from the outside. Somebody would say, well, the same mindset that would apply in making you successful in those professional areas, what more could you need? But the reality was, as we were seeing, because the things that we were trying, the things that we were doing, it wasn't working, which is one of the things that was a catalyst for me to be even looking into this topic, and I totally get what you're saying, because on the outside, I was very successful professionally, but there was this piece that was completely missing from our fertility journey. So it's interesting because it's doing something. I was doing work that you didn't immediately see the impact of.
Well, yeah, I think what got you to the success that you had as a professional is a drastically different approach than what it takes to be success. I mean, obviously everybody has their own approach and it works differently for everybody, but what it took for you to be successful in the fertility journey, and what we believe it worked best for us, was a totally different approach. You were approaching our fertility journey like you approached everything else prior. I'm going to grind. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to beat this into submission, whether it's the bar exam or a jury trial case. You went full steam head first into those ideas. And so we saw that it wasn't working. You were actually making it more difficult on yourself approaching that fertility journey in that manner. And then I think that's when you started to make a shift. And hey, look, I saw how difficult it was for you approaching it the way you had done prior, and how drastically a shift it had occurred when you started approaching it differently.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like I knew that like when I first started studying, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is so it." Like it was so painfully obvious to me that this was the thing that was needed. And so what were some of the changes that you noticed in me after I started studying?
Well, I saw your confidence and your happiness return. I mean, it was a difficult journey for us at the very beginning, and not having the tools to cope with those sorts of things, not having an understanding on how to approach it more from a different direction, was taking a mental and physical toll on you. I got to see those things. So I also got to see their subsequent return of your mental health and your physical well-being return to the state in which, we were at our happiest when we, first met. Up to that point when we were at our happiest, when we first met and we were dating and we were having a great time and living this really full life. I got to see you make that return to that part of your life.
Well, and so what was it like for you? Because, when I started making these changes, did any of them scare you? Because like, when one of us is learning, well, we happen to both be like eternal students. We're like devoted, growth-oriented people. But like when you saw this and you first really saw me diving in to the work, reading, going to seminars, getting training, doing all these things, was there anything about it that scared you?
Yeah, I mean, you were changing, but I also saw it as a change. There wasn't anything wrong per se, but it was a change to grow better. I mean, it's hard to quantify. You were perfect in my mind prior.
Oh, thanks.
And how do you get better from perfection, right? But you were changing for in a better way. So my fear is that I would be left behind. But I also know that, look, and probably most people, if you start holding something down to where they can't advance and grow and invest in their happiness, that's going to have the exact opposite effect of what you're trying to hold on to this idea of what was, only to drift farther away from what you want. So the happier, the more growth, the bigger your life became, the more I could support and enjoy it, the bigger my life became.
I mean, was there ever a thought that came through your mind like, she's doing some crazy shit? Like, this is getting crazy.
Well, we had a couple things. I look over at the wall and we were sleeping with a wooden doll under our bed. I mean, we did do some, kind of unconventional things, but I mean, that's a part of the journey, and that's a part of the excitement of doing new and different things.
That was actually the catalyst. I mean, just for a second, like, what really started me down this road was we had done all the things that conventional medicine told us to do, and nothing was working. And it wasn't until I kind of experimented with all these quote unquote alternative therapies and avenues that it really opened my mind to even shake up the paradigm. Because when we first started down this journey, I mean, both of us were fairly rigid in our thinking. We were used to kind of having a hierarchy and, kind of a chain of command. We were both, I was a prosecutor, you were a police officer. And we were kind of used to things happening in order and kind of letting, okay, the experts must know better. So we were moving, basically, what was happening was shifting from a mindset of others have authority over us and we just follow the procedures and we just follow a linear path, to really having to start questioning those things, because we were finding ourselves consistently in a place, whether it was what the white coats were telling us, that it just didn't line up. It didn't line up with what we valued. It also didn't line up with how we felt. Um, we were both relatively young on the spectrum, but at the same time, by medical standards, we were old. And so I think the circumstances that presented themselves to us really positioned us to have to start getting curious and to have to start questioning quote unquote authority. And I think that's kind of what started us down this road. Did that make you nervous?
No, I don't think it did. I think what made me nervous was an offset, a discrepancy in growth. There were times where we were growing. I went back and got into different education while you were doing this, and we were growing together on parallel tracks. Our growth didn't, we weren't learning the exact same things, but we were both achieving some form of fulfillment. So I didn't fear anything at that point. There were times where you were advancing faster than I was, or I was, doing something that wasn't as fulfilling, and the fear of being left behind did exist. But I did rest on the standard of a baseline level of trust, respect, and love for you, and that we are a team. We are always a team first. And I never felt like you were leaving me behind. I think there were times where you were going to make a leap, so to speak. Like you really felt like this big shift is, I'm feeling like I'm on the precipice of something. I'm going to make this shift. I really feel like something's clicking, well for me, speaking, from your perspective. But you would prep me with something. And then maybe we would be taking a 2-hour drive, and you would prime me with something that you would be listening to from that program. And so I would hear that something was coming. I would listen to a part of it, and then you would participate in it, and then you would return back to me and incorporate and bring me up to speed on what it was. Now, of course, I didn't take part in an entire program, but there was always this breadcrumb trail for me to keep up with you, or your arm metaphorically around me, moving me up with you. So I never felt like I was left behind. And that would have been a fear of like, oh my goodness, she's changing so much, she's not going to love me anymore.
Well, that's interesting, because I think that raises a question that I think a lot of women who are starting to make these changes and start seeing these incredible results, and then they go back to their partner and they kind of look, and he's laying on the couch watching football after she had just spent a couple hours on a coaching call with other women who are doing similar work, and everyone's cheering each other on and everyone's on the same wavelength there. It can feel disjointed.
Yeah.
That when she comes back into, her reality, that there isn't that same excitement, and it can feel like there isn't that same hunger for growth and hunger for better. But one of the things I like to caution women about is like, don't assume that. Don't assume that he's not interested just because he doesn't show the same level of excitement. I mean, and that's actually another thing. A lot of women are like, I'm doing all the things, I'm doing all this work, and it doesn't seem like he's doing anything. And, did you ever feel like our journey was such that, I was the one getting poked and prodded and going through all these procedures. But did it ever cross your mind that I was doing a lot and you were doing quote unquote nothing? That's not how I felt. But did you ever feel that way?
Yeah, I did. I did feel like you were contributing much more to the journey than I was, physically and subsequently mentally. So yeah, I did feel inadequate in that way, in that the best I could do to contribute to the journey was to support you. That's all I could do. I couldn't take the shots for you. I couldn't, I mean, I gave them to you, but I couldn't take them for you too. So
that was pretty gangster though. That was pretty gangster and you were a down ass mofo to be able to give me those shots because I could barely do it myself.
Well, you couldn't do it yourself. You turned gray.
That's so true. Well, okay. I mean, that's an interesting thing because I think sometimes when women are changing and when, it feels like we're doing all the work, there can be resentment.
Well, let's go back to that. You mentioned that, you have these ladies that you guys get together for a couple hours and you have this experience, a shared experience together, and the energy is drastically different. And, the partner, the man, whatever the situation is in the garage sharpening lawnmower blades or fill in the blank, right? And you come out of the room and, sometimes it's a feeling of exhaustion. Sometimes it's I'm sure a high and all these sorts of things. And energetically, that doesn't match. That doesn't mean that I'm not supporting what you're doing in the office and grinding and working. And conversely, I imagine that, the partners out there aren't, just because they're not in this room participating doesn't mean that they're not supportive of it. Energetically, it's just not going to be in an alignment. And there shouldn't be any judgment. I mean, I'm out there breaking my knuckle or shocking myself like I routinely do. And I come in the office and you're all happy about X, Y, and Z. And, I don't get upset that your energy is not matching my energy. There are times where we expect that energy to match. I make a steak and I'm super proud of it. And I ask you what you think. And, you're less than impressed. Our energies aren't matching. And now I'm resentful. Well, then you make the steak next time. But you can't have that judgment. You can't carry that judgment in this process. I don't think there's a place for it. I think it could be a dangerous path to go down.
Well, so let's switch gears and really get back to this, when you're leveling up, how do you get your partner to keep up? And let's go back to this idea that, sometimes when somebody's changing, it can feel uncertain. And sometimes, like when you see me making all these changes and taking these leaps, and, maybe part of you thinks I might leave you behind, sometimes it can, people can confuse the uncertainty with distrust. Like sometimes people think, oh, well, she's changing so fast, and I don't know if I can trust her, anymore. Did you ever feel that way?
No, I would say that when you made big leaps and I felt inadequate or insecure, that I think the communication was critical. There are times that people can get consumed and absorbed with what they're doing, and communication falls off, right? And so, for instance, if you're at an event that you're attending and it's 7 days of being a mute, deaf, mute, however you want to say it, and you can't communicate, you can't call home.
My husband's referring to silent retreats, ladies, and 7-day retreats where there's no contact with the outside world.
That's tough. That's tough for me, right?
I've done a few of those.
No communication. That's difficult. But I'm trying to, keep the energy up, keep you in a place so when you do call or there is communication, that you're not, hearing about things falling apart back here at home. So I'm still trying to be a solid, hard contributor in that way. Contributions come at different times in different ways. And so I have settled into I'm not prone to some sort of freak out. Right. So I don't think I've ever gone that drastic. But there's been times where I'm like, oh man, I wish we had a little bit more of what's going on with her. And what that means is what's going on with us.
Well, yeah. And I think the other thing is that I think you really laid it out nicely where, and I don't know if I did this consciously or if it just was part of the way that we operated. We're both deeply committed to each other, and, it's always been Team B&R. It, as you had said before, it's Team BAR now with Asher in our lives. But it was, I think we both were so devoted to us and, and seeing us grow as a couple that I really wanted to share with you what I was learning. And I think women who are listening, and when you're making these mindset changes and doing these things for yourself, ultimately it is about you first, and then taking it to your partner and taking it to your family, meaning the family that you're creating. It's an investment of time, resources into being better.
Yeah, if I thought you were doing any of this, and you thought, like, I truly believe that you believe everything you're doing is to make yourself better, which makes you better for me, which makes you better for us, which makes you better for the family unit as a whole. So if I didn't believe that you didn't think, like, why would you, like, this boils down to trust, right? I trust that you believe everything you're doing is for the greater good. I don't see you doing something that wouldn't be for the greater good of us and advancing us in some form or another. So that baseline trust, like I mentioned, is always that, oh, I don't, she's whatever. She thinks she's doing something that seems crazy to me. I already know she thinks it's going to make her better for us.
So that goes back to this thing that you were talking about trust with love as well as respect. So do you think that was one of the things that helped you kind of, even in the moments that you didn't quite understand what all this mindset stuff was and why I wanted to learn so much, why I was studying, why I was going off to seminars and trainings and things like that?
Yeah. If I went along with you, I didn't need to feel like I wasn't going to get some personal benefit of it. I was going to support you. And if you were going on your own, and I thought it was kooky, well, I love you. So, I want you to be happy. And like I said, at the beginning, I got to see how your mental health declined during that journey when you were, trying to beat the fertility journey by the throat. It didn't work. And if this is working and you're happy, if it's working for you and it's making you happy, then hey, let's support that and let's build that up, because I don't see a way in which you're happy and I'm not benefiting. I mean, this isn't completely altruistic here.
Right. No, I mean, I think that's an interesting way to put it, because the other thing about that, though, is you were always really and are really supportive of my growth across the board. And that was one thing, is that when you started to see the changes in me, I think it made it safe for you to start to get curious about what I was doing. I mean, because eventually, like, it's not like I ever had to fight you kicking and screaming to go with me and start learning. And
there's been a couple of retreats I've declined. I'm like, it's probably not my speed. Like the silent retreats, that's not my speed. I can't, it's tough enough for me to be away from the family without cell service, like go away for 7 days and not be able to call you or Asher. I'll tell you straight up, that's not for me. I'm not going to do it. And you've asked, hey, would you consider doing this? No, that's not going to work. Yeah. Totally fine. But there are other times where I've gone to things that I've been indifferent about. I don't know anything positive. I don't know anything negative. And I've taken a tremendous amount away from it and had a great time and still use it today. And that was years ago. So there have been, wonderful lessons along this journey. And there's been an opportunity to push you out of the nest. And then there's been an opportunity to welcome you back in. And there's been an opportunity for me to hang on into the nest and go, no, I'm not going.
Yeah.
So it's allowed us a lot of growth in ways that I don't think we would have obtained any other way.
Well, and I don't know, and it's funny because I know women use the term like he's not keeping up or he's not taking this on or he's not as excited about this as I am. And, I don't know that you have to be.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to a silent retreat. I'm not sharing any excitement in that. I'm going to support you. I'm going to be happy when you're home. I'm going to be happy that you got something out of it. So that I see that support isn't always synonymous with like excitement about everything. I mean, they don't have to. You're not excited about everything I do. I'm, tell you about my hunting trip. You barely open your eyes. I don't know.
But I'm never going to get in the way of you doing that.
Correct. And it's always supported on the back end with the logistics at home.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the other thing is like, I am not a hunter. I'll never be a hunter. I mean, it's just, that's your thing. It's not mine. But I see that it makes you happy. Just like you saw what was making me happy and what was making us happy as a byproduct, because I was in a better place. But I think that we had an agreement, whether it was specific or tacit, that we were going to support each other regardless. Like, I mean, it's even like the way that we operate now. Like, we don't ask each other for permission to do shit. Like, well,
it's that it goes back to the baseline trust. You're not going to run us into the poorhouse with some cockamamie idea. You're not going to, I mean, when we dated, right?
Barely dated.
I think everybody kind of sets up a loose, tacit set of guardrails, right? And at the beginning of the relationship, you may or may not bump up against those, whether it's a conversation with an old boyfriend or going out with the girls to Las Vegas for whatever. So like, oh, my standards are, hey, look, I would prefer I'm your man, then, be exclusive to that. Not that I'm just proffering hypotheticals. So that would be a guardrail, right? Like, hey, you know what? If you've got unfinished business, go handle that business. Otherwise, if I'm your business, that's the guardrail. And here we are. And as we have grown and our relationship has developed, those guardrails slowly fade off. I mean, we each know where our respective guardrails are for one another. So you're not running us into the poorhouse. You're not running into the arms of another man. Like these things aren't in the realm of overstepping any bounds.
We have an 85-year contract.
We do. And it renews every year. So it's 85 every year. So she'll get out in 85 years, if anybody's wondering. And so, yeah, I didn't, as we've grown, the guardrails have subsided. The trust has obviously grown. I mean, I don't know your financial history, like to the tax return T and I's dotted. So I'm like, she wants to spend how much on doing what? Oh, okay. It's going to help her out. I'll go with that. I mean, we'll try this. Right. I mean,
you also knew my history as a prosecutor, like, you knew that, like, the state of California trusted me with prosecuting the most serious violent felonies.
Let's not go down who the state of California trusts to be an attorney. So,
well, you at least had some.
You passed a test. You went to school and passed a test.
But you knew that I wasn't prone to like craziness. But bringing this back, I think, to the point about trust in relationships that, I would encourage any men that were listening to this is like, look back at your woman's history, right? If you in your relationship have a history of trust and your woman's got a history of making great choices, and even if she's made mistakes like we all do, I mean, that's part of the human condition, is to look at how she responded to it.
Well, yeah, I think there's an exercise that maybe ladies can participate in and drag their husbands unwittingly into this, is that if there's something that needs to be addressed in some way. Say, hey, look, he doesn't trust that I'm spending money on a treatment that is gonna advance us. Can you ask your partner, love? Don't expect an answer. Just let them sit with this question for a while at the TV, at the barbecue, whatever it is. This is just, do you have a level of trust that I'm advancing us in everything I do is to advance everything I can for our family. And we're always a team. And don't expect an answer. He's going to sit there and think about it. And well, yeah, she hasn't bankrupted us with a pet rock museum. She hasn't, well, maybe she has wrecked a few cars. I don't know, but if the general answer is, well, yeah, I trust her. She's always made the right decision for our family and moved us forward. What's there to question?
Mm. Yeah. I mean, that goes back to, that core thing that we've talked about for a little bit here is this trust thing. So, I mean, if the women listening to this, if we basically say, look, he may never be on the same page with you 100%, right? I think you had put this in so many different words that our growth paths may not mirror, but they are at least parallel, right? That, your man may not be doing every single thing that you're doing to grow, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't support it. It also doesn't mean that he isn't curious. And it also doesn't mean he isn't quietly taking it in.
Doesn't mean he's incapable of it if you did include him.
Right. Right. That's the other thing is like, your partner may be quietly taking this in little by little. And, it's through leading by example that even though your partner may not ever keep the pace because they just may not be as curious or as interested, that doesn't mean that they can't, quote unquote, keep up. And I think that keeping up is relative. It doesn't mean that they're reading the same books that you are or attending the same seminars. They might.
Yeah, you've dropped books on my desk and I've, set them on the shelf and never touched them. You've dropped other books on the shelf and I've, benefited from them greatly. So not everything is going to be a bullseye with your man.
Right.
But that doesn't mean I don't remember the title of the book you laid down and go, okay, all right. There's something she wants me to be mindful of with regards to that topic. Okay, I can file that away.
Yeah. And I think in the end, it's like, women listening to this and, possibly their partners might listen to this at some point is that, when you are on this journey, there are so many uncertainties. And when you can be certain about each other, you're certain about the trust, the respect, and the love that you have for each other. And even though the thing doesn't necessarily look or come in a package that you as a man would necessarily consume, that doesn't mean that it's anything for you to be afraid of. It might just be something for you to be curious about. And, give yourself the opportunity to, instead of immediately rejecting it, just get curious about it.
Yeah. You mentioned curiosity recently, and especially with all the turmoil that the media will sell us, and you have friends of different walks of life, and you have a conversation, and it starts out rather benign and innocuous, and then it turns crazy. I think the best advice you've given in the past 60 days to me that I've really taken to heart is just get curious. They believe they're doing the best thing for their family. You believe you're doing the best thing for your family. Well, how can anybody fault one another for that? We may not see the same thing, but we both believe that, right? But the getting curious part kind of reminded me of a realignment, something that we've practiced, and we haven't done it for a little while. It just came to my mind, is that make sure you're on the same page. You have a base level trust, love, respect, but we also used to write our goals down, and we had our priorities, and we've accomplished every one of those that we've written down. I've gone back and looked through our notes and been like, oh my goodness. So, I mean,
we're more verbal now because we're so much busier, but like,
if the goal is to have a baby, put it on paper, make sure both parties are committed to that. Because, I do know that you've had ladies come to your program that the partner wasn't committed to having that. And I'm sure that makes it a lot more difficult. But if everybody's on paper as to having the same goal and having the same baseline, that makes the vision and the belief that will happen, I think, a lot stronger.
I agree with you 100%. I think it also is a couple's choice to see that they both take the responsibility for looking at new things as opportunities as opposed to something to be afraid of. I mean, I think sometimes, and that's one of the biggest points of growth that my ladies experience is, the average person, when uncertainty comes through the door, the first thought is to be afraid of it. And one of the biggest changes, as I was saying, that my ladies make is that we take control and we take responsibility for the way that we think. So instead of seeing uncertainty as this thing to be afraid of, we see it as possibility.
Yeah. Uncertainty in it manifests in fear-based decisions. And when we try to excise fear-based decisions from our life, it drastically, exponentially, when we didn't have a bad life, we don't have a bad life, but when we make fear-based decisions, we typically don't get good results. And so when we try and excise those fear-based decisions from our life, our lifestyle goes up incredibly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that's not even a consideration for us anymore. Like, we just eliminated fear-based decision-making from how we operate.
Yeah, you have to recognize that that's a type of decision that's playing on you right now. Once you start recognizing, oh my goodness, I'm trying to make a decision based from fear, we were able to start making those shifts.
Right. And so, some of the big takeaways, and then I'll let you have the last word on, what we're trying to teach here, is some of the biggest takeaways for the ladies and their partners that may be listening is, number one, come up with a very clear shared vision for what it is that you want. And number two, I mean, it's all about trust, love, and respect. And respect does not mean, running your relationship like a tyranny, but it is about mutual respect and remembering that your partner may be growing at a different rate than you. And there's nothing to be afraid of when it comes to that. And frankly, when we can support our partner in a way that encourages that growth, then I think that the dividend that's paid is astronomical.
Yeah, we don't grow at the same rate, and we don't grow in the same topic. Your personal development is study, really nurture and nerd out on all this stuff. My personal growth is contributing in a different way, or handling something and that maybe I wasn't the best at at a time before. So growth isn't a mirror for one another. Sometimes it is. That's great. We've gone to events and shared experiences at these events and really, I think, grown at the same time. And that's been really cool. But we each have our own journey that we're trying to make ourselves better, because we want to be better for ourselves, to make the whole better, to make the team better.
Yeah. I mean, that's something I say to my ladies all the time. Like, as much as this is a shared experience as a couple, it's also deeply personal. So he may not ever, quote unquote, keep up, but give him some grace.
Yes.
And, and if he's curious and you can lead in the feminine, lead by example, and you can be influential instead of emasculating.
Yeah, that's a huge point. I think the best way to term it is, you approached our fertility journey from the masculine perspective, from a masculine point of view. Like, you're going to work this thing like it's a ditch down the side of the road with a shovel. And I think when you started feeling your feminine again, you were happier and obviously successful and growth exploded. I also think there's times where women leading in the feminine is substantially more productive than them trying to lead in the masculine.
100%. I mean, we're both very alpha, alpha female, alpha male, and that out of control, without us having done the personal growth work, probably would have just had us butting heads all the time.
Right. You want the kitchen clean, throw some lingerie on that question, come at it from a more feminine place where it's more enticing as opposed to more of an order. And I promise ladies with men out there, things will get done a lot faster.
Well, if you come at a man, if you act like a man with a man, he's going to come at you like a man.
Yeah. You want to act like a man, you get treated like a man.
Yeah.
And a man comes up to me and goes, "Hey, go do this." Fuck are you? It's not going to happen. Now you come at me with something a little bit more enticing from the feminine side, I'm going to be running with my nose in the air, doing whatever you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great point. So, I mean, ladies, I hope that you're taking a ton from this and really hearing from our perspective, don't expect him to necessarily be on, in the same paragraph. He may be somewhere on the same page, at least in the same chapter and possibly in the same book, right? At the very minimum. But don't expect your rate of growth to be his rate of growth. And I think when we drop the expectations of our partner that they're necessarily going to keep up per se, love them for who they are and what they are. And I think that our growth is going to have a ripple effect and is going to be influential and is going to rub off. Because,
yes,
I mean, even today, you don't necessarily study the exact same things that I do, but you see me living it and setting an example and setting a pace. And I think that you see the benefit of it. And so I don't have to shove it down your throat in order to get you to be curious and possibly adopt some of the things.
Babe, I've been trying that with you about getting out the door on time for a long time. How come it's not rubbing off? How come it's not rubbing off?
I am an islander, so I am on island time.
I know, love.
So, well, ladies, I really hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Fearlessly Fertile podcast. And I would really encourage you, take some of the nuggets that we've shared here, apply them in your relationship. Maybe this is a great episode to share with your partner and get a really awesome conversation going. Because unquestionably, your man wants to love you. He wants to support you. He may be a little confused about what you're doing. But when he can see that you guys can have great conversation about it, you're open, it really encourages him to be open as well. And the two of you are going to be better for it at the other end of it. Any last word to the gents, babe?
Trust that your wife is doing the best she can as she knows how to advance the ultimate goal for that family. And if she doesn't know how, then she's going to seek somebody who does, and trust that process is going to advance the ball down the court.
Well said. Thanks for being on, babe.
Thanks.
Love you.
Love this episode of the Fearlessly Fertile podcast? Subscribe now and leave an awesome review. Remember, the desire in your heart to be a mom is there because it was meant for you. When it comes to your dreams, keep saying hell yes.